Okay. Well, welcome to our conversation. And as you probably know, we start with three premises. One is that our biosphere is endangered, our democracy is endangered, and even now our humanity itself is endangered. So we generally talk about our predicament and then talk about ways to stay human, to become more radically human in spite of it all. So we could begin anywhere, but maybe start with the biosphere. Start with the atmosphere, perhaps.
So I should start by saying that when I saw your name of your podcast, I just absolutely loved it, right? Um, uh, because particularly it allowed me to do some searching into my history and your description, Frank, is that's perfect. So I'm really happy about what it is and what you're doing. Um, I guess I should start off with a quote from David Attenborough. Some years ago, David did a State of the Planet film video, with the BBC. And he started it perched high up in the Amazon.
Hmm.
And he quoted Dickens: "We live in the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times because there's never been more life, more glorious, more diversity on the planet as now. The worst of times because that diversity is now dropping faster than it ever has. And we all know why that is. So I'll mention the climate sort of quickly, I think, and then I think I'll go back to biodiversity because it's every bit as important as the climate, of course. So the climate emergency is just getting worse and worse and worse, faster and faster and faster. We are getting nowhere. We are headed at breakneck speed in the wrong direction. What I do is I follow the climate indicators, and that's emissions, atmospheric concentrations, global warming, ocean heat, and ocean acidification. It goes on and on. They're all at record high, and they are all increasing just in the past few years faster than they ever had. Seems the scientists are completely unaware of this. Um, I increasingly have a problem with not with the science, but with the majority of the scientists. I'd exclude James Hansen and people like Tim Lenton, but the majority, they're really not telling the public. They're really not telling us what the situation is at all. So I guess I can understand reasons, but I've been trying to tell the terrible truth for a long time. And that's where we're at. Finally, the scientists decided to agree with James Hansen that global warming is accelerating, and there's no question about it now. 2023, was this huge record. The scientists were completely gobsmacked by it, the word they used. Then 2023 was an El Nino warming phase. The next year was not an El Nino warming phase, so scientists said, well, it's going to get a bit better. No, it got worse. So 2024 was a new record warming at 1.55 degrees C. And in fact, the last couple of years, global warming has been tracking the worst case scenario, which nobody is talking about. And this year, because I follow it month by month this year, we are tracking on the very worst case 2024. So I mean, I always say it's hard to imagine it could get worse, and then it gets worse, right? Um, uh, Biodiversity. We've known for a long, long time that we're in the sixth mass extinction of life. Um, uh, and very slowly, it's come to be accepted by that particular scientific community, and that they were very reluctant um, uh, to accept that. Um, The first time I came across it, I'm trying to mention some books that I put down. Was a big book by Richard Leakey. Um, I've got my Julie with me, so she might be able to nudge my memory, which isn't that good these days. So Richard Leakey wrote this book called The Sixth Mass Extinction, and I think it was called The Future of Humanity. Absolutely great book. Um, and of course, E.O. Wilson, who is the emeritus senior, certainly in the United States and the world on this. And he's done great work, entomologist. He said we're entering a new age, and he gave it a Latin name. It's the age of loneliness
Hmm.
because we're losing all our kin, right? And they are our kin. Emotionally, we know about it, even if intellectually we're not aware of that. So we have a lot of like the IPCC, we have a scientific panel called the IPBES, International Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and its Economy, basically. And yeah, things are saying everything's getting worse faster. There's at least 1 million species who are clearly headed for extinction. Now, the rate of the extinction, when the scientists, the biologists basically, who first said, okay, we're there, and this was many years ago, they said this rate of extinction is probably the fastest ever. And now we know for sure it's the fastest ever. No question. I mean, it's way beyond the worst extinctions that have ever happened before. And then the problem is that the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, back in their fourth assessment in 2007, they mentioned the decline in species and they said under every climate change scenario, the rate of decline of species will increase, even on the very, very worst case scenario. And today, we are certainly practically on the worst case. Um, uh, Atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations, they're tracking the worst case. Methane and nitrous oxide, the other two greenhouse gases, they're tracking the worst case. We've got that officially from the Global Carbon Project. So, one thing that probably we're not aware about enough, and there's a whole lot that we're not aware about, is this fact that not only are we in the sixth extinction, but with continuing to emit greenhouse gases, we are accelerating that rate, which is already accelerating. I guess I've just mentioned that everything is accelerating. So I I always come back to thinking about the children. Um, uh, I think about nature, which I'm lucky I live in Victoria and I can really, really enjoy nature. I suppose I should mention that we're very lucky that we've got a big wild garden where we live, and we sit out and we've got a huge view right over to the ocean in Victoria. We see a bee once a day. We see a few birds a day. We don't see any butterflies. We see a white cabbage moth once a day. That is how it is. That's the reality. The people who are following this have been following it forever is the World Wildlife Fund and the Zoological Institute of London. And, they do this Living Planet report. I think every few years. They don't do it every year. But yeah, it's still crashing down. And it's not crashing down, by the way, only in the Amazon. It's it's declining everywhere. Every region we look at, there's a decline in biodiversity. I guess the thing that most people will be aware of is the huge abrupt decline of insects, which I guess I've already referred to. And the media quite properly called this the apocalypse of the insects. So I guess that's my introduction. I do my best to tell the terrible truth.
Well, thank you for that. One of the big questions that comes up for me is why, as a people, are we not talking about this?
Yeah.
Because you
Um,
follow popular
well,
media, and none of this comes to light. I mean, we are carrying on as if tomorrow is going to be just like today, and it's not. Tomorrow is not going to be like today.
yeah,
So
Frank,
what?
the single most important thing in addressing climate change is what you've referred to, is simply talking about it.
Yep.
And Julie and I, we've been doing this work for years, and we know, I mean, we suffered the fact that socially it's a taboo sort of thing.
Hmm.
But I know another important reason why people aren't talking about it are not aware about it. When I first started with the Climate Change Institute in 2008, um, I started communicating more with the scientists and more with the head of the NGOs, and I got involved with them. And I soon learned that when I was started saying, "Look, where this is where we're headed for," the response was always the same from all of them. They said, "Peter, that's scary. And we cannot say what's scary. We cannot frighten people because they claim that the psychologist said that that will put people in depression and they won't be motivated to do anything." That was completely wrong, actually. At the time, there was a there was an American psychological report on the very issue. What is the psychology and the communication basis of climate change? And yeah, they said this idea was complete rubbish. But unfortunately, that has made the evil climate change denial campaign kind of worse, right? So people are confused by the climate change denial campaign, which of course is going on worse today than it ever has. And that started, by the way, in 1989 in the United States by the fossil fuel corporations, basically, and the other big manufacturing industries. And, I never believed that it could carry on as everything got worse. The science told us over and over and over, this is getting worse. You know what happened? These people got even more active, even more aggressive, and even more deviously clever. So I think those are the main reasons why nobody's talking about it. I think we have an absolute duty to address it and talk about it. You talk about radically human, right? Um, Humans are not the people that these experts say we are. I know this for a fact. They say we can't face these big dangerous things, there's big dangerous monsters, we can't do that. No, our whole human history is that we have faced, in quite small numbers and small technology, we have faced global catastrophic changes, and we've overcome it. Amazingly, we've overcome it. We've overcome the ice ages, and we've overcome all kinds of horrible things happening to us. Um, so, um, to define human and radically human, Frank have defined it. This is the most important thing today. There is nothing more important than that.
You think that some sort of, I hate to think this way, but like a terrible event will get people's attention? Yes, some of the science fiction books concerning climate collapse talk, they refer to this a tragic event that gets people activated. I'm beginning to wonder if even that would help, or I don't mean
Now
help.
we've had about John, this has been my assumption for years. But I've watched massive, incredible events happen over and over and over, and there's been no response at all.
Right.
Really no response out there whatsoever. So I'm afraid that I think now we're in a situation where things are so terrible that truly it is becoming psychologically very difficult for most people, to address it. People like us, maybe, that have been involved in this kind of thing for many years. Yeah, yeah, we can continue to address it, but the public out there, it's really hard. And as I say, every big major event, the scientists do not intervene. They don't say anything.
Right.
They keep doing their models, and this is what they're doing today. They're finally acknowledging that James Hansen was right a few years ago. The global warming is accelerating. I know that it's going to continue to accelerating simply because the driving primary factor, which is called Earth energy imbalance,
Mhm.
for the past 15 years has been going at a double rate than it's ever gone before. So we not only have accelerating warming, but all of the drivers are accelerating and increasing rapidly.
Yeah.
So we really need, more than anything, we need a science intervention because, I mean, those are the people that the public trust and listen to. But they're not getting it. So it's left to, people like us, and obviously there are not enough of us, but we're doing what we can do, and I really respect you guys. You are amongst the people that I most respect, right? I mean, I've known you for relative time now, and yeah, you're great people and you're doing great work.
Thank you. Wow. Howard Odom said that we should seek out that which will happen anyway. In other words, if you know that something's going to happen, you should take action now to get to the place where you need to get because that action is coming anyway, right? So in this case, we know what's coming. We know we're going to hit a doubling of CO2. We should immediately take all human activity and focus on reorienting towards the fact of global heating and climate collapse. And part of what kind of pisses me off, Peter, is the fact that all these reports stop at 2100. Does our responsibility to life on Earth stop at 2100? To children stop at 2100? Suddenly that's a magic portal into freedom at 2100. It's insane.
Yeah, no, you're right, and there are many huge fundamental mistakes that the IPCC has made from the start, and there's a reason because the IPCC is compromised by all world governments.
Mm.
So this is an absolute no-no. We have a scientific assessment program with on this scientific panel bureaucrats for all the world nations that have a pretty big influence on what comes out. So there's a huge problem there, and we're sort of stuck with it. Um, the psychology, which I guess you're referring to, um, I have to go back to when I started in activism. I started in the nuclear disarmament, peace movement,
Mhm.
ban the bomb, action against mutually assured destruction, and there was a lot of us. We had big conferences all over the place. And eventually, apparently, we're successful because Reagan and Gorbachev signed a nuclear weapons control agreement, which has lasted until just a couple of years ago. Um, uh, so we all were looking for answers, Jonathan. We were all looking for why the hell is it that we intelligent species people are putting the planet on notice, right? Because the numbers of these nuclear weapons was just going up every year, absolutely incredible. It's like 50 or 6,000 at one point.
Right.
And of course, we had the USSR and the United States, opposing each other and being belligerent. And so we were searching, what's going on.
Right.
A lot of people discovered Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, and she was very useful and a fairly well known name. Now, I got to give you a name that isn't well known, and most of us discovered this man. He's called Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Oh,
And he was very active, writing many books in the 1950s, early 60s.
Mm.
At the time, he was based in England, but traveling all over the world with multiple centers all over the world. The BBC introduced him and said, "This man is one."
that
Yep.
might be better. Yeah.
We lost about the last 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay,
So you're
am
backing
I a
up.
little clearer now?
Krishnamurti.
I should introduce. Can I introduce Krishnamurti again?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to
Because
hear
it's so
your.
fascinating.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, a person, brilliant person that today isn't so well known, but he was well known when he was active in writing in the 50s and early 60s, is a man called Krishnamurti. He was referred to by his followers, that were many, many around the world, as K. And he was regarded at the time, by the BBC, for example, as one of the preeminent minds in the world at the time. Now, his big message was, we are messing up at an unbelievable, all society is totally messing up in every single aspect of society. And he would go through them, he would know about them.
Mm,
So his solution was a bit hard to us to understand, but today, my God, we can understand it. He said, there is one solution. It's you, and
mm,
you must change now, and you must change fundamentally, transformation. And you can do it because basically, as I say, this is not our human nature. So Krishnamurti, when I look back, he was explaining and promoting what was radically human.
mm.
And he was very big in the peace movement and disarmament, bless him. So that's really how most of us found him. He wrote many books. I'm trying to quote books here for you because that's how. My favorite book of his was "You Are the World."
Mm. Nice.
Even to me, what makes it so hard to try to be positive and stay engaged is that even the things that I think that were accomplished by the peace movement back in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, some of those now seem to be falling away. I mean, we're now in a war within Europe, and the Middle East is engaged in horrible slaughters, and it seems adding these components to the spectra of climate collapse is just making it harder and harder for people to step back and get engaged. I guess I
It does. It
believe
does.
that as things get worse, it's going to be harder for people
Mm.
to get involved, and I'm concerned about whether we can even keep the momentum we have now.
Well, John, you mentioned, a huge event, and it's starting, and it's not going to be very far away. The big, huge event that's going to change everything, is the decline of the food production, right?
Mhm.
World food production has been so successful; it's been absolutely amazing. I mean, started in the United States, really, of course. And our production has just been going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, right? But just a few years ago, that stopped. There were signs of a plateau. And the IPCC, in its recent assessment a couple of years ago, said that that rate of increase was now declining. So, in other words, how I would put it is that global heating and climate disruption is clawing back our very successful production of food.
Mm.
And unfortunately, we've not seen nothing yet. What will happen is that, of course, prices will continue to rise. I mean, they'll go through the roof. The governments and the food corporations are trying to do everything they can, and they are doing some good things. But the public will then, demand an answer. The big problem is to the answer, which I have always expected because it's inevitably going to come, when your food prices, when you can't afford food, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's a revolution, guys. So unfortunately, we now have this lunatic Trump, who's president of the United States of America.
Mhm.
And he's had a mission actually for a long time. He's wanted to be a president for a long time. in terms of his aims, he's been highly successful. In terms of his aims, people must not underestimate Donald Trump. He's extremely clever, right? And but for the worst kind of reasons. So what I call this is he's doing fossil fuel enforcement, right?
Mm.
So he's gaining control of the American people very, very rapidly. That's spreading to other regions of the world, particularly Europe. We're seeing a so-called right wing, big change, huge change. So that's doesn't really make me. I'm not a believer in hope, guys. Right? I
Right.
read Derek Jensen some years ago, and he woke me up. You know,
Mhm.
this big book. Jensen always writes these big books. He said said, do not, do not use hope. Hope is the worst thing that you can use. Right? Hope
Right.
is basically an excuse for inaction. And that really that really shocked me. I realized, oh my God, the guy's right. So this is what we're hearing increasingly from everyone who really is involved in the emergency. We keep on hearing hope, right?
Mhm.
Well, the only hope is us, right?
Right.
The biggest hope, and where we find radical humans, of course, is still in the countries that have indigenous populations, right? And in the United States and Canada, we still have, God knows how they've survived, we still have traditional native indigenous people. We call them First Nations. And they're very, very, very different people. They are practicing being radically human.
Mm.
I've sort of realized that they've been right all along. And we, including me, we've been wrong all along, and we should learn up fast, which the indigenous people always said we would do, but we haven't done. So I would say, in a few words, I think what I have learned is that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are those people who know that Mother Earth is what we completely depend on, what
Mhm.
we must work under, and what we have to work under. And this is how they've been living for, thousands and thousands of years. And their traditions, they've kept. It's absolutely amazing, you know. When you go to one of their meetings or powwows, that saying the same thing over and over. And we, advanced, clever, technological people, we're still not bothering to listen. So the other kind of human being, of course, is those who don't know, right?
Right.
And that's what's causing all the trouble. Because those human beings think that they can do anything with the planet, okay, that they can always fix it. There's more and more talk about geoengineering to fix the planet. Geoengineering is insanity on top of insanity, right?
Mhm.
Um, uh, Sorry, I mean, I have some friends that are into it in a way, and I do have some respect for them, but it's really not the way for the public to understand what we got to do here. Um, uh, we When I looked up radical human, as I say, there's this book apparently which is quite popular called Radical Human, and it says that AI and everything else is going to
Mm.
solve everything for us. And it's the answer, for us to being even more human. I've never had anything more insane than that, right?
Right.
So we're not even going to attempt to be human. We're not even going to attempt to use our intelligence, right? We're gonna we're gonna transfer all of that to artificial intelligence. Oh my God. Now,
Mm.
if that isn't bad enough, of course, what we're getting now is that these massive servers that are running artificial intelligence more and more and more, they're needing more and more and more energy.
Right.
And that's being gotten as Trump says, by burning coal.
Yep.
So we've never burnt coal as fast as we are now. And there's been a little tiny bit of a let up just this year in China. But China's building many, many coal plants a week like it was doing years ago. India, of course, is the same. India's mining more coal than ever. And both China and India, I mean, they're using fantastic intelligence and technology, which you've got to admire. It's amazing with developing their renewable clean energy.
Mm.
But that's no good if you're not getting completely off fossil fuels. And we have to get completely off fossil fuels, 100%. So that's the. Um, I'm sorry. I guess everything I say makes things matters look more dire, right? Well, yeah, they are more dire,
They are.
and some of the public, yeah, I know can take this because some of them I talk to and they think about it and they come back and say, "Well, we've looked into it, Peter, and things don't look too good. Maybe we should do something."
Mm.
But unfortunately, our public in the so-called developed world, we live in the undeveloped world, right? Because this is the industrially developed world, which is destroying the world,
Mm-hmm.
rapidly destroying the world. Um,
I think that at least the public that would view this
what was I saying to him?
particular podcast would appreciate a little bit more background concerning what you had said about the technological solutions to climate collapse. The whole idea of geoengineering. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think we all know there's some serious issues with it, but could you perhaps expand a little bit on why you don't think, putting aside the whole intellectual construct that technologically we can get out of this,
Right.
what specifically could you say about why it's not going to work?
There's a lot of people who are really promoting geoengineering. They think it's great. They think it's. By the way, this is typical
Mm.
to our treatment of the environment in our society, and I
Yeah.
know this. We don't. The governments don't respond to anything until there's what I call a body count. I'm afraid,
Mm.
until lead or mercury is
Mhm.
killing increasing number of people in the world. And then they react, right?
Right.
They react with a technological fix. Problem is, the technological fix have worked to an extent. The big one mentioned is the Montreal Protocol of the ozone layer. By the way, we all realized that the depletion of the ozone layer was going to wipe out
Mhm.
practically all life. We did realize at the time, and the scientists were very good. They were right on it. My God, they were great. But most of the people that I know, and when I read the research papers, they really don't have any interest in emissions. Really, they don't. And they actually say that been saying for years that we can't do anything about emissions, so we're going to have to geoengineer, right? Um, uh, yeah, as James Hansen has said and colleagues last year, we actually have come to the predicament where we do have to work out some cooling of the planet
Mhm.
because we are overheating like very, very, very fast indeed. When I look at the satellite NASA maps, we got heat waves all over the world, and it's May, right?
Right.
And they're huge heat waves, and they're bouncing around,
Mhm.
which makes them even more damaging and devastating. We also have drought all over the world. I mean, I'm talking about every continent and nearly every country now. When I talk about these unprecedented heat waves that are coming earlier than they've ever come before, they're more intense. They're lasting longer than they've ever lasted before, and I can say the same thing about drought. Um, what I try and do is really communicate this because the public is intelligent, right?
Hmm.
So if it is communicated to them, I mean, over and over and over, they can understand it. But there's another big, huge roadblock, which has been going on for many, many years. Basically, our developed society has been socially, culturally engineered. We are now engineered into a consumer society, right? A
Hmm.
consumer civilization. And the result, of course, is what we're seeing, right? The result is more and more burning of fossil fuels to keep the consumption going. I just mentioned AI. Um, uh, the person who really alerted us to that was Noam Chomsky in the 1980s,
Hmm.
in which he wrote this big book that got a lot of attention called Engineering Consent.
Manufacturing
Consent.
consent, yeah.
Engineering Consent.
Yeah.
It was actually a follow-up by a previous book that was done about 15 years prior to that, which made essentially the same point. Manufacturing. Oh, Chomsky's, thanks, Julie. Sorry, Chomsky's book was Manufacturing
Mm.
Consent. So
Mm.
that's the one you may remember. The other one that wasn't known was called Engineering Consent, but it noticed and hit on the same problem, the same issue.
Mm.
And of course, now Chomsky's worst predictions are all coming true. Everybody lives on the screen now, right? I just want to mention Hugh Grant, the English actor.
Yeah.
Bless him. He's put out a message on the social media in which he's saying, guys, you've got to stop doing this. You've
Mm.
really got to get your kids off the screen. This really, really is not good for them. And it's not good for us. So thank you for that, Hugh. But I mean, it's taken us over, hasn't it?
Mhm.
So the things that we few, are kind of fighting against, it's pretty big. It's pretty big. But the crash is going to come because the climate is already collapsing.
Yep.
Antonio Guterres, who's been absolutely superb on the climate change file, as was his predecessor. Um, uh, what was he was great. Kim.
Boom.
Okay, can't remember. So all what I'm basically saying is that the recent years, all of the secretaries, generals of the United Nations have been absolutely tremendous. They have been putting out the message whenever they possibly can.
Mhm.
So that message is put out there by the UN. But
It
yeah,
does.
we have to face this cultural and social engineering, as I call it.
It seems that though the UN message, uh, to accomplish it, countries need to work together. Certainly, there's going to be no chance of like any effective geoengineering if it's not a worldwide effort. But right now, the tensions between different countries are so severe, it's hard for me to imagine, even if there was a solution, that people would get together and implement the solution.
Right. Right.
Yeah, John, I believe for a long, long time that the main so-called driver behind increasing greenhouse gas emissions is actually war. Is
Mhm.
actually that we live in a society that believes in war. I mean, I
Mhm.
know this very well from my years in the peace movement and what I read today. People don't realize it, right? Look, the Ukraine war started in 2000. The Ukraine war is 10 years old.
Mhm.
In the past 4 years, we have at least 250,000 people killed.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's huge,
Mm.
huge.
Mm.
And there's no sign of governments wanting to end it. What the governments are doing and pushing it harder and harder and harder. No doubt the big armaments corporations are very happy about that, and no doubt they're lobbying the governments. Um, uh, Gaza, Gaza, known, recognized genocide by the UN, by several agencies now. The lady who is the UN rapporteur for Palestinian living She has been absolutely wonderful, incredible. We've had some really good scientific publications, mainly from the Lancet, about how many deaths we really have, about how many lives have really been ruined, and how long that's going to go on for. So we call our economy, right? We call the market economy a competitive one. That's a war economy. That's what it is, right?
Mhm.
All of the countries, even the small, tiny countries, right?
Mhm.
They're spending a lot of their GDP, their income, on producing more, what they call better, which means more destructively killing weapons. They're all weapons of mass destruction, in my view.
Mm.
So, I keep on going back to the peace movement. Sometimes I wonder, Peter, maybe you should have stuck to that.
Well, one thing that I'm really curious about
Oh,
is this.
50,000, 50,000. No, I think it's 54,000 people.
Yes.
Wow.
People killed, murdered in
Mm.
Gaza.
Gaza. Yeah.
Gaza.
Defenseless people. They're being demolished
Yeah.
day after day after day, week after week after week by fighter jets made in the U.S., improved, so called, by the government of Israel,
Mm.
and um, they have been dropping some of the biggest bombs that the United States makes.
Mm.
And of course, the United States is sending all of these bombs and weapons all the time. Um, uh, um, it is absolutely horrible.
Mm.
One of our problems, in my view, is we have lost the idea about what good and evil is, right?
Right.
Do you ever hear about the Gaza genocide being evil? Not really. This is one of the greatest evils that we've ever seen in our whole history of humanity. It's very specially different in
Mm.
several ways that
Mm.
makes it amongst the most evil for sure. I agree with Chris Hutchins. I agree with him that all war is evil.
Chris Hedges. Chris Hedges.
Chris Hedges. I agree with Chris Hedges, right?
Yes.
He was a war correspondent with the New York Times for years and years and years. He's a very intelligent, great man. He's motivated for all the right reasons. And he made a video in which he said, I wrote this book about war, and I mean it's got so much worse. I'm going to have to write another book, right? Um, uh, so
Yeah.
basically, he wrote an academic book with all the right numbers. All war is evil.
Evil. There's a pattern, it seems, that we're making war on the earth, we're making war on the future, we're making war on different peoples around the planet, we're making war on health. It's this unending dominion and crushing it. I mean, Frank, you and I have talked about some of this.
Frank, you had a
Yeah.
question?
Yes, I am curious about whatever happened to bioregionalism.
Mm.
Because, we've been talking about war and nation states, and every now and then, every few years, somebody pitches this idea, well, why don't we organize human activity around bioregions, which makes perfect sense. And yet the idea never gets any traction. And I'm just curious, what do you hear about that?
Why is that? Bioregionalism caught on in the 80s, didn't it? I mean, a lot of us, it made perfect sense to. And there was some, local and regional start on it, near where I live, for example, Cascadia.
Cascadia.
My view of history is that most of our destruction, insanity, it dates from the nation state, right?
Mhm.
The nation state, they were all created by war. Even Canada, okay, a little one, but even Canada was created by war. And war has always become the main business of the nation state. So we have to replace the nation state. It has to go. It's worse than dysfunctional, right? And bioregionalism, Frank, obviously is clearly the intelligent, obvious way to do it.
Right, which also begs the next question is what about our educational system that needs to change to educate people about the virtues of bioregionalism? Why don't we do that?
Yeah. So the education is the not recognized big part of why we are what another one of my favorite people, Thomas Berry, said, why we are an autistic society to nature. Our education is a very big reason. I remember Chomsky giving one of his lectures, and somebody asked him a question. He said, education? We teach everything that's good out of our kids, right? Of course, yeah, right. There have been, great attempts at what people have called alternative education. I guess the best known one is Miriam Montessori, but there's been several others, right? Um, uh, um, our education system it's got a lot better, but it's really, really bad, right? But it's basically brainwashing young kids. Um, uh, um, they grow up to believe, right, in what we're doing.
Yeah.
They grow up to believe in our economy is a great thing and everything else, and progress is really good, and we are socially very clever. They're being taught all the wrong things, right? They need to be taught, as Frank says, about bioregionalism. They need to be taught about the most fundamental thing about humanity, certainly radical humanity. They need to be taught about nature. They need to be taught about the natural world.
Yeah.
Now, one of the people that was very hard on our education system was Krishnamurti.
Mm.
He said our education system is really no good. And he did a lot of work on this, and actually he started up some schools. So we definitely need an alternative education. And of course, the education should mostly be outside.
Mhm. Yeah. We're kind of in a tough spot, it seems. We're programmed from very early youth to see the world in a particular way, Darwinian in one hand, Descartesian mechanistic on the other hand, and that separates us out from that. If you were, you have your own kids, I guess. If you were to think about what are a couple of just ideas we could consider as someone watching this video, what should we be thinking about? What would be a better way to engage as being radically human in a world facing climate and ecological collapse?
There are some very, very fundamental, massive errors that have been made in our society in general, and certainly in the education system. If you look up human, what's human, you'll find the same thing over and over. Human is what distinguishes us from the other animals, or mostly they don't even say other animals. They say what distinguishes us from animals, right?
Hmm.
So you're teaching that. I mean, where are you going to go from that, right? I mean, um, uh, um, that really, really is crazy. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. And what can we do about our educational system? Well, people can certainly fight the use of the screen in the schools, that's for sure. Look, there's absolutely no question from the science that all the children and all the young people today are going to live in a really horrible future, right? I mean, look at the extreme events we've got already. They are accelerating and they're all going to continue to accelerate. So for my generation, I feel very ashamed of myself. We to this situation. But I also believe that we have to give our children a lot of leniency, take a lot of time out of school to let them work on the arts, right? The arts are
We're
Oh, we're
beginning to
frozen.
lose you again.
Be more
We're-
important
we're-
than the sciences.
Peter, we're
We
frozen
really,
again.
Peter,
And so
you're-
So, we.
Put the video
So,
off for a
just turn
second.
off your video.
Oh,
yeah, maybe shut your video off and then turn
Oh.
it back on and go back about 1 minute in your thinking.
Talk about greening the heart of education.
You were talking
Oh, yeah.
about giving children some flexibility, some leniency given what they're facing.
And the arts also. Yes.
So meaning for what we're facing?
Mhm.
You were saying that children are going to be facing a very tough future, and that we should be promoting things like art, and then
Yeah.
we lost you.
Yeah. Yeah. They're out there. Well, we've got Cirque du Soleil coming. Julie and I were invited to a small put on by friends. It's a troupe of Cirque du Soleil young people.
Hmm.
I watched this with my eyes wide open. So there are great things happening, and our young people are indeed doing great things. And yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of young people out there, trying to get the word across. Greta Thunberg was absolutely revolutionary,
Mhm.
no question. On this particular issue, she was absolutely amazing. Her name is always going to be remembered. I'm quite sure of that. I had a discussion with my older son who lives in Victoria, who's a director of the Parks Committee in the government of British Columbia. He knows a lot of stuff, and he's got two daughters who are absolutely charming.
Mhm.
And so I said, Roman, I said, Julie and I were making a bit of a change on our approach to our climate change work. We've always said that don't let kids under 8 or 10 years old, don't let them get this. But now we're saying, no, we really got to sort of go easy and do. So he interrupted me. He said, Dad, they all already know.
Yeah.
That is so upsetting. Right. I do get I do get upset. I really do. I don't know why I've been taken to some emotional capacity, but that's something which has been gotten rid of in the social and cultural engineering, right? People don't get emotional anymore, and you can't just blame it on the British, stiff upper lip, right? I mean, you're just not seeing it, right? So, who was it, Rodin, that made this great sculpture, that everybody believes in? What is it?
The thinker.
I think, therefore I am. I had a lot of trouble with this. And one day I realized, hey, guy, actually, you're wrong. I feel, therefore I am. Because if human beings, and this is very much part of a radical human, if human beings don't have their feelings, their emotions, okay, which, by the way, links them to all the rest of the animal world, right? We know that now. Science has made some great discoveries. We're not going to progress. And I just want to say that a lot of people have done great work and written wonderful books that lots of people have read about the fallacy of what we call progress.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we do have that out there. We do know that what we call progress is actually just the opposite.
Right? Do you have any other questions?
Not really, but I would agree on this whole myth of progress thing. It just it's based on the belief that everything keeps getting better and better, which invalidates our ancestry and it invalidates all the knowledge that came before us, which is crazy. It's a really strange way. It's sort of anti human history because we've always valued the wisdom of our elders. And all of a sudden now we're saying, no, everything's got to be new and better every day and forget the past. And we lose our sense of history, we lose everything. So,
No, I think that's also, Frank, a very, very critical thing on all this. Julie and I, a few years ago, went to, there was a creation spirituality center near Victoria, which is really, really good. There are some great things going on, really great. They had speakers come in, and one of the speakers was he was originally a Catholic priest, like Father Thomas Berry, and he got into the true history of humanity and what we really are, you know. So he started his talk with a question. He said, "How long do you think we have been around?" And though I actually wasn't an answer, but he said, I know because I've asked lots of people. Basically, the longest is about 100 years. You know, there are people who will do some deep thinking and say 200 years, right? Hmm. Well, what we call Homo sapiens, which we know now is a total misnomer, genetically as well as culturally, um, uh, we've been around for 300,000 years. We, with our progress and cleverness and everything else, our science and technology, which reminds me, I must mention another book. Um, uh, we are 1,000th of who we are. Julie has a great description. She said, if you put your hands out, we are just at the end of our fingernails.
right.
All of our other history, all of our other ancestry, all of our other life is below.
Yeah.
Um, uh, um, two little points then. Um, I used to do some presentations using what's called a pyramid of life. You may be aware of it. It starts with viruses and bacteria on the bottom, and guess what's on the top?
Of course.
Man.
The
So
alpha.
I would start by saying,
Yeah.
no, it really, really, really doesn't work like this. It's absolutely opposite. The human species is the most totally dependent species on all other life. Sorry, David Suzuki, it's not interdependence, it's total dependent. And Suzuki's done wonderful work, so I'm just making a joke about him, really. Um, uh, so that's an example of how we think and how education and everything has taught us to think. And you'll still find this on the internet, you know. I mean,
Sure.
it's just, oh my God. The final thing I do want to mention is if you want to find out where all this originated, read this incredible book by Professor Carolyn Merchant of Berkeley University, retired now. And the book was 1988, I think, or something like that. The book was called The Death of Nature, right? Our friend wrote The End of Nature, McKibben, and that was a good book. But this was an amazing book because she was a professor on environmental history, right? Well, most of us kind of thought that this corruption, you know, probably started with our idea of Christianity, right? Most of us did. The idea of domination, right? You know, which is
Yes.
wrong, okay? Because we're under all of nature. You know, we can't dominate nature. She said, no, actually, that's not where it started. She explained it started, guess where? With the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution completely changed the way of thinking that humans had had all along, well along up to that time.
Wow.
And the science has lost its way. Science used to be described as the acquisition of knowledge for the benefit of man, right? Well, benefit of human will be now, but not now. not now. The science is, they believe that science is completely reductionist. It's totally objective. You have no value judgments. You cannot bring any emotions or values or ethics or anything into it.
Mhm.
So we've redefined science, and we've redefined it in, I'm afraid, all the wrong way. There are other scientists. I mean, Fritjof Capra is still out there, but there are other scientists who we can read and understand rather better. So Carolyn Merchant is a must read.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. Look for that.
Getting close to our hour, Peter, and what we like to do when we think about ending these programs is to ask you, ask the people we have conversations with, what do you have in mind for the next 6 months or a year? What's your plans for the near future?
Well, I guess I'm captured, by all the climate change science, which I do every day, and I put it out on the social media every day, and I still go to conferences occasionally and do that stuff. So yeah, and I'm not dismayed about that. I mean, that's okay. I mean, I'm doing sort of the best I can do with the science. I mean, there's way more than I can do as a human being, but I'm doing the best I can do with the science. Over the next year or few years, where do I see myself? Um, I got to be honest with you. My memory is not what it was. My memory is failing, which kind of alarmed me. But then, of course, we live in this wonderful place. We got a small apartment in a old Victorian mansion, which, as I mentioned, has all this wild grass out there, and we can sit there. And I've realized that I'm totally appreciating and emotionally affected by the natural world, way more than I ever was, you know. So I'm very happy about that. I'm very, very happy about that. And I think that's the best thing that we can do. My my wife and support and advisor, manager, and everything. She does great work. She's got a website, and she still does work in the schools on what she calls greening the heart of education.
Mm.
And she's not the only one. There are some other people out there, so that's great. Um, uh, um, there's one thing that helps me, John. I read the biography by Gandhi.
Mm.
Gandhi's biography is amazing, so honest. I mean, it's an amazing read, wonderful read. In it, he said, if you're going to make progress in social movements that he was involved in, there's one rule you've got to follow: never ever think in terms of success or failure,
Mm.
ever.
Mm.
Don't do that.
Mhm.
So thank you, Gandhi, and I continue to, remind myself about that. Right. Look, we are all very successful. I know you well enough to know that you're very, very successful human beings. So we must just continue to do that, right?
Let's keep your perspective. Right.
Yeah. Wonderful.
J-Lo, any other things you want to add?
I'd just like to thank Peter. I know, when we come across your emails and the things that you post online, your videos are exceptional. Want to encourage everybody to watch those. Just the truth telling that you do is so powerful. It's a big impact for my research and for what I'm trying to do, just to try and keep up, and for all the things that we do together here as a group. So thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And thank you for
Okay.
taking the time to talk to us today. Frank, you have
Oh,
anything you want to add?
No,
look, I really, really looked forward to this. I mean, this is one of the most important things, that I've been involved in. Really, I say that very, very sincerely. Um, uh, Looking at the radical human. That's brilliant, brilliant. Yeah. So thank you.
thank you
Okay, I'll
so
sign
much.
up.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Talk to you all soon.
Thank you,
Bye.
Julie.